Merry Christmas. You know, it's hard to believe that Christmas is here already. You know, it's kind of snuck up on me this year, and I don't know where time has gone, but you know, it's a day that we take out of the year to celebrate the birth of our Lord Jesus Christ. Hopefully this morning, as we spend time together, that you will look at Christmas in a little bit different light today. That perhaps you'll experience Christmas in a little bit different way this morning than perhaps you had before. But I want you to take a moment with me, if you will, to consider what took place on that Christmas morning. And actually, really what took place 9 months prior, that Jesus was sitting at the right hand of God the Father. The next moment, he was in the womb. Consider that with me just for a moment, to think about God, the Almighty, who was there at the creation of the world, who when he spoke, things came into existence, who willingly, because of his love for you and for me, took on the form of something he created, flesh. And not only did he become a baby, but he was in the womb for 9 months. The Bible's clear that when Mary walked by Martha, who was pregnant with John the Baptist, that they both moved in the womb. It just amazes me to think about God's love in a different context of what he gave up sitting at the right hand of God the Father to take on the form of a baby in the womb, to go through the challenges of birth, and to be in total need of Mary and Joseph to support him and to raise him. See, that's what we celebrate on Christmas morning. And as Mickey said, it is the greatest gift that has ever been given. It's a gift that, you know, as most gifts, and many of you have probably already opened up your gifts this morning, that the interesting thing about a gift is that until we receive it into our presence, it is not ours. Could be this great gift that's wrapped and underneath the tree, and until we receive it and then unwrap it, it doesn't become ours. And so this morning, I want you to kind of think about baby Jesus that we see up here in front of me, that here's this greatest gift that God has ever given. Now, you may know about him. Most everybody does. But have you ever really unwrapped him? Taking him as the gift that God has given you, taking that into your possession, and really gotten to know him. See, I believe that it's kind of like a gift that we get, that we unwrap, and we don't really know about all the things that it can do until we start to play with it and get to know it. Well, it's very similar with our relationships with God, that as we get to know him more and more and more, our faith continues to increase in incredible ways. You know, we even see in the book of Ephesians that in 2:8 and 9, it is for by grace that we are saved through faith, and that it is of God, not a result of works. It's a gift of God, so that no one should to brag about how they got to heaven. It's a gift. It's a gift that needs to be unwrapped. Now, I don't know what your Christmas traditions are, and we don't do this anymore. As our kids are grown, but we would always save the best gift for last. It was kind of a family gift, and everybody knew that it was going to be the best gift. So in order to have fun as parents and see our kids running around the house, we would hide it. Now, sometimes if we were a little feisty, we would hide it in a difficult place because it was fun to see them scavenging around the house with this eager anticipation of finding it. But sometimes intentionally we hid it a little bit too good. And they come back and they want some hints. And because we're their parents and we wanted them to find it, we'd give them hints here and hints there until they finally got close enough and they found it. And then we got to watch with their eager anticipation as they open it up to discover what it is. I'm here to tell you this morning that God has given us all sorts of hints on where to find Jesus. He's given us all sorts of hints so that our faith is based upon substance, not just thin air. And this morning, we're going to look at a variety of these substances and these things that our faith is built upon this morning, you're through the story of the Magi from the east. Now, history tells us that there was three, and we think there's three because there was three gifts. But you know what? The Bible's not clear on how many there were. It's clear on the three gifts, and we will actually talk about that. But they were Oriental astrologers that were from probably what is modern-day Iraq that came about 800 to 900 miles to Bethlehem to find Jesus. And so there's three things I want us to see this morning about their journey that is really the same journey as ours. And it was a journey that started with faith. You know, I always ask questions about the scriptures, and I want to know why. And we're teaching some of that on Wednesday nights. We had a great discussion last Wednesday night. I don't know if it was the donuts or the coffee or the hot chocolate, but we had some really good conversations, so we might have to do that again. But one thing for sure is our faith always has a substance. Now, you can believe in something that's not true, and guess what? It'll never be true. Or you can believe in things that are true. And so I'm curious, what was it that had these magi, these men, traveling east? Well, they were from what was Persia in the day. Remember, the children of Israel were in captivity in that area. And so they would have had access to certainly the book of Daniel, maybe even the book of Numbers. And in there, you see a couple of prophecies. Now, there's 7 different prophecies. Some want to say 8, that Jesus fulfilled in his birth. And so the first is that he was a descendant of Abraham. Now, I just want to point out, you'll see it on the slides behind me, I think, that when these were prophesied. So the descendant of Abraham was prophesied back in 15 to 1300 BC, before Christ. And we see the fulfillment of this in Matthew 1 and Luke 3. He was also going to be a descendant of Jacob. That was prophesied in 1446, in between 1446 and 1260 BC. We also see that fulfilled in Matthew chapter 1 and Luke chapter 3. Probably the one that is most interesting is that the virgin birth, and that he was going to be called Emmanuel. That was prophesied at 740 BC. 740 years before Christ was born, we find this in prophecy. And then also the phrase, a child will be born. That was made in 605 BC, and we see that all throughout the Gospels. Now, here's the interesting thing. This comes from Daniel, is where he was going to be born. He was going to be born in Bethlehem, and that was prophesied in 742 BC, so 742 years before Christ was born. And even that Herod would kill the Jewish males, the Jewish kids, was prophesied in 597 BC. So there's all these different things here. And then the 8th would be the return to Egypt, where Mary and Joseph had to flee to Egypt, and that was made in 755 BC. So what I'm pointing out here is faith always has an object. It always has a substance. And so the Magi would have at least known of what Daniel said. Now, the other thing we see in Daniel chapter 9 is the time of his birth. If you go through the sequence of the wording there, they narrowed it down to the specific time and the specific place. So these guys start on this journey, and we know, and it was also prophesied that a star would be seen. And it's difficult to tell specifically if that star is Jesus or it was prophesying the star in the sky. But either way, these men started out on a journey. Now, if they're leaving and they've got to travel 800 to 900 miles, they started out on this journey by foot and by camel a long time before. And it was by faith that they continued on their journey. But it was also a journey of sacrifice. And if you consider what they gave up on the way, obviously they took some treasures with them, but think about the time that was going to take them. Think about the danger they would have been in carrying all that treasure that long of a distance with bandits on the road and various different things. Think about the time away from their families to go on this journey based upon a prophecy. So obviously they had faith. They were willing to make an incredible sacrifice as they embarked on this journey. Let's see what Matthew says as we pick up the story in Matthew chapter 2. verses 2 through 6. This is their account. For we saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for it is written by the prophet, and you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So as they came into the area, they met with Herod, trying to figure out where it was. This is where Herod begins to realize that there's supposed to be a king that is being born of the Jews. And so, as we know later, he ends up killing every male Jew, I think from the ages of 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, to make sure that he kills this person. So, but the other thing I want us to see is that they had every intention of worshiping this new king from the very beginning. You know, we know that with what they packed. We know that with what we see take place again in Matthew chapter 2. It says this, after listening to the king, they went on their way. So they continued on their journey, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. How amazing is that? I mean, just consider that for a moment. That these men stepped out in faith. They made an incredible sacrifice of time, of their treasures, even putting their lives on the line to come and worship Jesus. And God, just like he will to those who seek him with all their heart, he will guide you to find Jesus. And not only that, when we come to the point where we recognize how much we need Jesus and we yield our lives to him and we begin also to walk by faith, sometimes that is a sacrificial faith, because oftentimes when God speaks and he tells us to go in a certain direction, it doesn't make any sense. But as we get there, he reveals more and more about who Jesus is. And our faith, as we encounter him, increases more and more, as these magi were about to see. And so when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Now, one thing that Scripture points out is at this point they're in a house. They're not in the manger where Jesus was born. This was probably, as Jesus is a few years old, certainly not the night that he was born, as we think because of our traditions and the songs that we sing. But they came in, they saw him, and they immediately fell down and worshiped him. Why did they worship him? Why do we worship Jesus today? Is it just because of what we've been taught in church? The songs we sing? Or does it have evidence that we are convinced of who he is? That we are convinced that he is God who took on flesh so that we could have a relationship with him? That God who says that he will take our hearts of stone and he will give us a heart of flesh. I like to look at it this way, that when we accept Jesus and we continue to worship him in faith, in sacrifice, that what he does is he gives us a heart transplant. And our blood is replaced with his. And as that takes place, we continue to worship more and more, because now we're doing good works that he prepared in advance for us to do. And as we get to know him more and more, our faith increases. And then we have this desire to give all of our treasures to him, to give our talents to him, to be able to give things. But let's take a look at what the Magi gave him, because to me it's very fascinating. Verse 11. Then, opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. I don't know if you are aware of what these three things symbolize, but gold, being a very precious metal, is a symbol of Jesus' divinity, that he was God in the flesh. If you look at all different religions, obviously a lot of them will coat their statues in gold. But if you look at the Jewish religion, it is the finest of gold that they cover things in. So gold was to be this symbol of divinity. How did they know that? Again, from these prophecies. And again, from the stories that were told from the Jews being back there. But this gold was a symbol of this baby's heritage. God in the flesh. Frankincense. Frankincense was a resin that comes from a tree. In order to get it, you made certain cuts in the bark so that you allow it to flow out. And it's a highly fragrant smell. Oftentimes it was used to burn incense as an offering of worship. But it's a symbol of his holiness and his righteousness. But frankincense was also used with the idea, as we'll see with myrrh, that there's going to be some sacrifice. And myrrh, again, was made from trees. It was come from trees. And you think about it, it was a spice that was used during the embalming process. Sometimes used to drink to numb pain, as we see the drink that was offered Jesus on the cross. How did these three wise men know to bring these three things? Gold, a symbol of divinity. Frankincense, a symbol of great worship for who he is. And then myrrh, symbol of suffering, affliction, and death. I think it's because they, in their faith and their journey, continue to study the limited things that they had from the Old Testament. Another prophecy that they may not have been aware of, I don't think they would have been aware of, is Isaiah 60, verse 6, which says this. A multitude of camels shall come over you. The young camels of Midian and Ephah, and those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense, and shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord. They wouldn't have known about this prophecy. But here it is, made in Isaiah long before Jesus was ever born. Evidence of who Jesus is. Evidence of that he came. But the other thing that takes place in their journey is that it was a journey of faith. It was a journey of sacrifice. It was a journey of worship. But as we see at the end of their story, it was a journey of change. Now that they had met this baby, God in the flesh, and they had given their worship to him, they were warned that they needed to change direction. Let's look at verse 12. It says, and being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. God had spoken to them yet again as he led them with the star. Now he was leading them through a dream to say, don't go back and tell Herod, as they had originally agreed, where Jesus was, because Herod was going to kill him. And so it required change on their part. And why was it so easy for them to not go back to Herod? Because they were convinced who Jesus was. My question this morning is, are we just as convinced of who Jesus is? Or have we never really unwrapped the gift to get to know who he is? These men knew that this was no ordinary baby. They knew that their journey was going to be costly. They knew it was going to be dangerous. They knew it was going to involve sacrifice. But they went anyway. And with eager anticipation, when they saw this baby, combined with all the signs that God had given them in the prophecies, combined with the star that led them right to the place, and then seeing this baby Jesus, they gave the gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Oftentimes on Christmas, we give gifts because we want to see the exuberance of our kids with gifts. We like giving. I think giving gifts is better than receiving gifts because of the joy it puts on people's faces. But if we forget about the gift that God has given, what's the point of Christmas? In a moment, we're going to participate in communion. And I'm going to ask that you come in family units, that you come together and receive the elements and then go back to your seat or go wherever that you would like as a family. And I'm going to ask the male patriarch of that family to lead you in taking worship in communion. If you're not here, if you're single or you're by yourself and you don't have a family here, I'm going to encourage you to maybe join up with another family. Mickey and I will be up here sharing and presenting the communion to you, and we would love to lead you in communion. But what we're going to do, we're going to go through 1 Corinthians. We're going to look at communion. But I want us, as we come forward, and you come at your own time. When you're ready, come. We're going to have some videos playing in the background, and what I really am asking you to do is in an attitude of worship to listen to the words that are being sung in these two songs. Kind of put yourself in the mindset that you are as one of those magi coming forward to see this new baby. This baby who shed his life and his blood so that you can unwrap the best gift ever given. Receive him as your Lord and Savior. And not just have the privilege of spending eternity with God in heaven, but have the awesome, incredible opportunity to get to know him more. To have your faith increased so that your faith abounds. And the more you know about him, the more faith you have, and the more it's easy to walk through times where it requires sacrifice. Walk through times where it is the unknown, that we're walking by faith, not by sight, because our faith has this incredible object. And so as you come, I want to remind you about communion. Paul said this in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. He said, "For I received from the Lord that which I also delivered to you, that Christ, on the night that he was betrayed, he took bread. This is in the presence of all of his disciples, including Judas, who would betray him. And when he had given thanks, he broke it. And he said, 'This is my body.'" In a moment, as you come and you get the elements, the juice that symbolizes his body, the cracker that symbolizes, I got that backwards, the cracker that symbolizes his body, when you put that in your mouth and you begin to chew, I want you to visualize Christ, that little baby, on the cross for you. And then when you take the juice, which symbolizes his blood, then recognize his blood, this baby's blood was shed so that your life can be changed forevermore. So Paul, repeating the words of Jesus, said, "This is my body for which is for you. Do this in remembrance of what I have done," what I'm about to do. In the same way, he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. Whoever, therefore, eats the bread and drinks the cup in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of our Lord." For a long time, I used to think that communion was a little strange. That we're celebrating the brutal death and beating of Jesus Christ. Why? Because we know that he rose again from the dead 3 days later, just as that was prophesied in the scriptures. We know that he is no longer in the tomb. We know that he proved who he was again and again so that our faith would continue to increase. As we come this morning, challenge you to come in a worshipful, humble manner. Before you take of the cup, I ask that you would pray. You may even before you come, to pray. Confess all known sin that you have in an attitude of worship even before you come. Ask that Jesus this day would allow you to continue to unwrap the best gift that is ever given so that you can know him more. So as we start this video, Mickey and I will come to the front. I'm just asking that you spend time listening to the words, get your heart in the right manner, confess sin, and then as you're ready, come forward as family.